President Biden announcing the commutations of 37 federal death row inmates, reclassifying their sentences to life without the possibility of parole. One of those commutations includes Jorge Avila Torres, who was sentenced to die after he sexually assaulted and stabbed two girls to death in 2005, 8-year-old Laura Hobbs and 9-year-old Crystal Tobias. 4 years later, he strangled 20-year-old naval officer Amanda Snell. Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn slamming Biden for this on Hannity last night. Watch.
They went out and went forward with these commutations and moved it to life without parole, rather than having these individuals have the death sentence carried out on them after they have killed policemen, service members, children. This shows you that Joe Biden has no regard for the rule of law.
3 federal inmates remain on death row. Joining me now is Cornell University Law professor and founder of equalprotect.org, William Jacobson. William, what do you make of these commutations? I mean, it's stunning to see what these individuals have done. Just awful. What do you say?
Well, I think what's stunning is how sweeping it is. He is not taking into consideration a particular case. He's not taking into consideration whether somebody in prison has changed their life. The usual things that we look for when a commutation is done. None of that is true here. These are cold-blooded killers who've shown no remorse, and they're certainly not having their sentences commuted because they've, found God and they've become religious in prison, anything like that. This is a purely political move, and that's what people need to understand. There is a wing of the Democratic Party, and not just the Democratic Party, but mostly the Democratic Party, which does not accept the death penalty under any circumstance. And if somebody does that for a religious view, I understand that. But this is purely political.
Those weren't the only commutations. President Biden also commuting the sentences of 1,500 people and pardoned 39 earlier this month. It was the largest single-day act of clemency in history. Biden has issued a total of more than 1,600 commutations and 65 pardons. He's still facing criticism, of course, from both sides of the aisle after pardoning his own son, Hunter, of felony gun and tax charges. William, who do you think is next to receive a pardon? Marie believes the president's brother, James, may be next. What do you say?
Well, I think that's a logical thought, that he is going to protect the family business. I mean, Hunter wasn't the only one. A lot of people have described him as the bag man for the family, and that may or may not be true. But I think the president's brother, other family members, I think they're all going to be protected because Joe Biden does not want them prosecuted for what could have amounted to payoffs to Joe Biden through a circuitous family route. So I think that's a good estimation. I think you're also going to see pardons of people who were involved in the investigations and prosecutions of Donald Trump. So I think that those prosecutors are going to get pardons, preemptive pardons, because Trump and others have announced that they are going to be investigated, and they should be investigated as to whether they abuse their power or not. And I think you're also going to see pardons for January 6th commission members. You're going to see Liz Cheney, people like that, because what Joe Biden has been doing, and it's really the team behind Joe Biden, is they have been using his pardon power as a sweeping political tool, both to get his son off the hook, but also, I believe, to protect his family and to protect his political legacy.
I hope somebody starts reconsidering all of this. It just seems egregious to me that he uses it in any way he wants to and sets free these horrible criminals. Let's move on to the murder of this UnitedHealthcare CEO. The suspect in that murder case, Luigi Mangione, pleading not guilty in a New York courtroom yesterday. Mangione seen smiling in court after entering his plea. If convicted on the federal murder charges, he could face the death penalty. More than 30 protesters held up signs outside, and they're chanting in support of the accused killer. A new poll from Emerson College showing 41% of voters aged 18 to 29 call the killing of the UnitedHealth CEO, Brian Thompson, acceptable. William, you teach law at Cornell. Why do you think so many younger folks out there are aligning with a murderer in this case?
Well, I think what you've seen on campuses for multiple decades now is a demonization of our system, a presentation that our system is inherently corrupt, racially corrupt, and that capitalism is bad. So there's a strong anti-capitalist trend on campuses. It's not the majority, but it's enough that you do get some measure of the student body, of the younger generation, thinking that political crime is okay as long as it's a bad person. And so I think that's what you're seeing. You're seeing a destruction of the values in the younger generation via the education system of the rule of law, of the notion that you just don't get to kill people you don't like. And so I think that's a problem. And I think this should be the reaction from the younger generation to this assassination, this premeditated assassination, which has resulted in a very rare first-degree murder charge in New York State, because it's considered an act of terrorism, which pushes it up from second-degree murder to first-degree murder. You're seeing that reaction is something that is very frightening for our society. And I think you may see play out in other cases that people think it's okay to kill somebody you disagree with or you think has
unbelievable.
A bad capitalist job.
It's just amazing. Jonathan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you said something very profound. You talked about this sort of breakdown in scrupulous values that we have and that we're seeing throughout our nation. And I wonder if you think, is that something that kind of prompted the red wave to happen? I mean, this idea, this sense among families throughout our country that we need to get back to the scrupulous values that made our nation great in the first place. And one of them being not wanting to see someone die just because they work in a certain industry, whether it's popular or unpopular, but this idea that the values we hold as a nation have been on trial for the last 4 years, and it's time to return to what makes our nation great from a moral standpoint.
I think there's no question there's a pushback nationwide against the craziness of the campuses. And I work on a campus, and Cornell's not as bad as some, but campuses in general have some of the craziest ideas that you can imagine. Many of the campuses are run by incredibly radical faculty who have no accountability to anybody. So, yeah, I think there is a pushback. I think you saw that throughout the nation. And I think that one of the unique features of the most recent election was the blue-collar workers, the working class, shifting over to the Republicans, which was not traditionally how it's been. So I think there's no question that society is looking at the campuses and saying, what is going on here? And I think that is part of the political pushback.
When you talk about values, I mean, the idea that it should be illegal to kill someone seems obvious to me, but obviously I'm just catching up on some of this thinking. William Jacobson, thank you so much. Appreciate your time today. Happy holidays.